Cathie Wood's entire portfolio is based around disruptive, high-growth stocks. That's the exact opposite of what most value investors are looking for. But what if I could have the best of both worlds? I analyzed Cathie Wood's entire ARK portfolio, and I found one company that would qualify as a value play based on fundamentals that even Warren Buffett would respect. And I don't think it's going to remain a value play for long. What's going to do it? This is Cathie Wood's flagship fund, the ARK portfolio. It's got 35 different stocks. I started by taking all of these companies, putting them into my own watch list, and then filter them by my favorite metrics and ratios. My favorite being the price to free cash flow ratio. I ranked these from smallest to largest. All the companies here that have a dash, that just means that they are not generating free cash flow, so they are eliminated. And the company that has the best price to free cash flow ratio is IRDM. The other ratios and metrics are looking pretty strong. Their revenue growth over the next 5 years is projected to be 6.6%. Got high gross margin, decent operating margin, decent profit margin. The next step is to look and see, does this company have any major red flags that would make me eliminate them from my search? The way I do that is I have an automated spreadsheet where I type in the ticker on my dashboard right here, IRDM, go to my Buffett supplement, where I automatically calculate all of Warren Buffett's red flags that he uses. If a company has a cell that's highlighted green, then it's a green flag. It means that they have a high chance of having a durable competitive advantage. If they have a red flag, then what that means to Warren Buffett is he needs to look a little bit deeper into that red flag to see, is there a real problem here, or does it get a pass? In this case, the red flags that I'm seeing are a high interest as a percentage of their operating income, their interest expense, and they have high long-term debt ratio, long-term debt divided by their profit. So debt seems to be one red flag. They also have red flags down here at the bottom related to their profitability compared to their capital expenditures and their depreciation. To answer this first one, capital expenditures and depreciation, I can see what is it that Iridium does? What is their business model? So from their 2024 annual report, you can scroll down here to the company profile. They are the only commercial provider of voice and data satellite communications offering true global coverage. So that's why they have a lot of capital expenditures. They got to put satellites into space. And then they have high depreciation because when the service life of those satellites is diminished, they have to replace them, which generates another high cost. This is the thing that's going to hold them back from having a high profit margin, are these high costs right here. Now, that doesn't necessarily eliminate them from contention, because if their share price is low enough compared to their profits, then they would still qualify as a value play. The next red flag was having to do with their debt. From their annual report, I took a screenshot right here of their upcoming debt payments. In 2025, they have $33 million in debt. 2026, they have $3 million. We see $18 million in 2027, 8 and 9. And then in 2030, they have a large debt payment coming due of $1.7 billion. So first of all, I want to see, do they have the profits? Do they have the cash to handle these next 5 years of debt payments, which is in the low millions? We got 33 million, 18 million. Let's go to stockanalysis.com, go to their financials page and see what kind of income they're dealing with. So their pre-tax income over the last 5 years, well, let's look, 2024, we got 125 million. In 2023, they lost money. And then in 2022, they had 9 million. So they've recently become profitable, and their profit in 2024 is 125 million. Over the last 12 months, 133 million. So based on that, they shouldn't have any trouble covering their debt payments over the next 5 years. Furthermore, I can look at their current cash holdings. They have $50 million in cash. That's plenty to cover their upcoming debt payments. Given that they have 5 years to come up with enough cash or a way to restructure their debt to handle the 1.7 billion, I'm not worried in this case that debt is going to be eliminating Iridium from contention. Before calculating Iridium's intrinsic value, there are 2 more red flags that I want to look at. The first thing that comes to my mind is, seems like they're competing with Starlink. So I want to see how much overlap does Iridium's business model have with Starlink? Because on the surface, it seems like they both have low Earth orbit satellites. There's been tons of information out there about the dominance of Starlink, how they have so many satellites out there. So in their latest press release, they did address the competition with Starlink, and I found that pretty interesting. Right here, I feel somewhat obligated to talk about Starlink and other startups, as it's clear from short interest that investors still don't understand how Iridium is differentiated from them. Starlink in particular has done a great job expanding their network and attacking new markets. They've made strong inroads into the consumer sector and drawn share from established VSAT broadband players in the areas like maritime and aviation. Starlink, however, does not have L-band spectrum nor the global coverage required to support mission-critical applications. Further, they do not have the ability to address safety applications on ships or air traffic control. So there is some differentiation between these two companies that sets Iridium apart. While there is some overlap right here between, specifically in maritime, where Iridium has been used as low-cost primary connection by some boaters, our distribution partners still see an important role for Iridium's weather-resistant global coverage. So even in the areas where there is overlap between Starlink and Iridium, Iridium still has a competitive advantage according to them. So to me, that is satisfactory that they're not going to be just rolled over, steamrolled by Starlink. The other red flag that I want to address is Iridium's share price. Clearly, they've had a massive sell-off since the middle of 2023 and the end of 2023. We saw a massive sell-off. Part of that could be explained by investors not understanding the difference between Iridium and Starlink, but I wanted to make doubly sure. I wanted to know what is the reason for this major sell-off. And ChatGPT does a great job of surfing the internet and summarizing all of the reasons for why this happened. So here's the ChatGPT search right here. ChatGPT comes up with, in Q3, they missed an earnings report. So they had a loss of 1 cent per share, falling short of an expected 3 cents profit. So a small earnings miss, that would account for some. But to me, it looks like the big reason for this sell-off is a strategic setback. Qualcomm abruptly ends its collaboration on the proprietary satellite to phone service. I pulled up the source for this, which is on Wikipedia. And right here in 2023, Qualcomm and Iridium announced an agreement that was supposed to bring two-way satellite messaging services to Android. That would have been a major contract. And if that was being pulled off the table, I can see why that would cause investors to sell off. Now, my contention here is that, yes, that is a good reason for the price to go down. When you have a major strategic setback, it makes complete sense. But was this sell-off overblown? Have they sold off way too much? That's the question I want to answer. And the best way to do that is to calculate the current intrinsic value of Iridium. To do that, I use my automated spreadsheet right here. I type in the ticker. I also paste in the analyst expectations for the future revenue growth. I find that on stockanalysis.com. Let me pull that up real quick. The highest expectations are double-digit growth in revenue. The lowest expectations are low single-digit declines in revenue. So after pasting that information into my spreadsheet right here, we come up with an intrinsic value based on the analyst projections anywhere between 33 and 72, which is a massive upside. The lowest analyst projections give me an upside of 13%. The highest analyst projections give me an upside of 150%. If instead of using the analyst projections, I use the past revenue growth, which over the last 5 years, they have grown their revenue 7%. If we project that growth forward, they have an 83% upside. And finally, my projection here, this is where I put in my own revenue growth projection. I use 3% to see if they just increase their revenue in line with inflation, then they have a 42% upside. So this company has a massive upside. Their past free cash flow margin over the last 5 years, shown on this graph right here, is 37%. I am reducing their past free cash flow margin by 4%. I do that in this table right here. I take into account the R&D, capital expenditures, cash acquisitions, and stock compensation. I like to count stock compensation against companies, especially if they're buying back shares, because if they're diluting their shares by giving shares to employees and then they turn right around and then they buy those shares back, it's really just paying their employees with extra steps. So I count 90% of the share of the stock-based compensation against their free cash flow. I count 10% of their cash acquisitions against free cash flow, which we see here. These are two numbers that are typically not counted against free cash flow. And then for their R&D and capital expenditures, normally these are counted 100% against, But I like to give a little bit of credit because research and development is going to lead to new products in the future, which could contribute to higher free cash flow. And then with their capital expenditures, if they are putting more satellites into orbit, that is also going to result in a greater free cash flow. So if their capital expenditures is going up, I like to give them a little bit of credit for their capital expenditures, just 10% on both. But the result is a new average free cash flow margin of 32.5%. Their average was 36.5%. So I am reducing their free cash flow by 4% for this calculation. And we are still seeing a massive upside based on very conservative revenue growth figures. Now, the analysts think that revenue is going to go up on average anywhere from 7 to 8. Let's see, we got 4% in 2026. So anywhere from 4 to 8% is what the average analyst consensus is. But what does the company say about their own forecast? I like to look at their most recent press release because this is taking into account the latest information. If I scroll down here a bit, down to 2025 and longer term outlook, they are saying that total service revenue growth should be between 5 and 7% for the full year of 2025. And that is in line with the average analyst expectations. Also, I want to know how reliable has their projections been in the past. To answer that question, I'm going back to their annual report from 2024. And right here in 2023, they unveiled their guidance to deliver $1 billion in service revenue in 2023 and generate approximately $3 billion in free cash flow. This turns out to be a pretty conservative projection because if I go to Iridium's revenues today, over the trailing 12 months, they are already up to $841 million. So in 2023, they unveiled their projection that they're going to hit $1 billion. They've done 9% revenue growth in 2023, 5% in 2024, 6% over the trailing 12 months. To me, it looks like they are on track to hit their revenue targets. They do not give wild revenue targets like Elon Musk does about Tesla and about Starlink. I'm inclined to believe that a 7 to 5% revenue growth is reasonable. And so if I put 5% revenue growth over the next 5 years, 3% revenue growth for years 6 through 10, and then 3% revenue growth going into perpetuity, then my projection gives me a 60% upside. So what I'm seeing with this company is a massive, massive upside if they're just able to hit their very conservative revenue targets. Now, one other concern that I see is there's been lots of macroeconomic pressures lately, including tariffs. So I also wanted to find something where they address the tariff situation. In their latest press release, I pulled up the transcript here. As Matt mentioned, there remains a high level of certainty on tariff policies. Even though the tariff policies were not contemplated in our February guidance, we estimated that if the proposed tariffs of 10% on most of the world stay in place, while it would have a negative impact on our costs for the rest of the year, we quantify as approximately $3 million. It can still be absorbed within our current guided EBITDA range, especially in light of our mitigation efforts. However, if the original tariffs announced on April 2nd were to be implemented, they would have a much more significant impact on our cost base, at which about 6 to 7 million would likely cause us to be outside of our EBITDA guidance range. Taken together, this outlook supports our forecast for our service revenue growth for between 5 to 7%. So given the 10% tariffs, which is the most likely outcome for this trade war, they are in line with their service guidance of 5 to 7%. So taking the tariffs into account, taking in the most recent information, I am seeing a massive upside with Iridium. This is the next company that I'm investing in on my public YouTube portfolio series. This is my current public YouTube portfolio. I've got 21 companies that I've invested in. If I filter these by most gains to least gains, you can get a quick look at the current portfolio. My best holding being Hims, my worst holding being Simply Good Foods. This is a long-term mindset portfolio. I'm looking to hold these companies in most cases well over a year because I'm also interested in the lower tax bracket that you get into with long-term capital gains, which means I have to hold these companies for more than a year. It's another advantage of being a long-term mindset investor. I personally like to focus on value companies because I think that there's a strong chance of a recession in the near future, and value companies are going to perform the best in a recession, assuming that they are strong companies with strong profitability, generally low debt, and very few red flags, because a company that is priced very high is generally it's expected that that company is going to grow a lot in the near future. And if we come into a recession, then the environment suitable for growth is no longer there, and those companies will fall the farthest. If you want to see why that it's likely we're going to enter a recession in the near future, check out this video right here. Hope to see you there.